happen. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Well, they must be planning on something bigger happening. I don't know. But we're also getting reports that many of the wealthy people in Israel, or some of them we're told, are jumping on their yachts to hide out in Cyprus. So anyway, I don't know. I pray nothing more is going to happen. We've got too many dead people on both sides. Of course, a lot of the Iranians, the Persians, they want freedom. They want liberty. And of course, we pray that for them as well. We played clips over the weekend. You know, we were on the air 2 hours on Saturday, 2 hours on Sunday. And we played clips of many of the Iranians rejoicing, celebrating. Some of the women taking off their burqas, the young gals taking off their burqas and giving the that obscene hand gesture to pictures of this quote supreme leader. We also had a family, a group of them, large group of them, sitting on their balcony overlooking the city where the bombings was coming in from Israel, cheering every time Israel bombed, and they were literally passing out popcorn. So a lot of the Persians want freedom. They really do. We pray that for them. And maybe that will happen. Joining me now is Jim Paff. Jim, welcome to the broadcast again. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Did you go to the parade on Sunday? We talked about you might go. Did you go?
I didn't. I'm going to say I very selfishly decided not to take the 1 hour trip to try to go through there. One of my employees did and went through that. And, you know, it's kind of funny. The left was putting out things saying no one was there. Of course, you had to get through security to get into it, but there were tens of thousands of people there celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Army. Mm-hmm. And that's primarily why they were there, is to celebrate the greatest army in world history, probably, and freedom in the United States. You know, the Army is 1 year older than the country,
right?
And that's a good thing. It was a good thing then, and the United States has been one of the greatest blessings in world history for advancing peace and prosperity around the world. We've inspired that, and we've been in a period of great prosperity worldwide, largely influenced because of American freedom. And the U.S. Army represents the bastion of that. That is the foundation. And certainly, I don't want to take away from the other armed services because they do a great job too. But without the U.S. Army, we don't have this country, and by God's grace and favor as well too. So it's been a blessing to the world. I hope we can continue to do it for generations to come.
Indeed. All right. So I'm sure you were like us following the proceedings that were unfolding in real time in Iran and in Israel. We're on the air 2 hours Saturday, 2 hours Sunday. It's heating up. And now we're hearing tonight that according to a report by I-24 News, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has ordered that preparations be made for the United States to potentially join the ongoing operations by Israel against Iran in case the green light's given by President Trump. The report further states that officials within the U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, likely including CENTCOM Commander General Michael E. Kurla, support U.S. involvement in Iran, but there is opposition by other senior officials in the Trump administration, end quote. President Trump has been making some comments that have a lot of us confused. We can't really sometimes tell where he's coming from on this one. I don't know what he's ultimately going to say. I do know he has said, look, if Iran touches us, he said over the weekend, you're going to regret it. Well, apparently they did do some damage to one of our embassies over in Iraq. So whether that is being factored in to all of this or not, I don't know. But there is clearly, as I stated on the radio and TV show today at 1 o'clock Central, going to be a massive split in the MAGA movement if we go to war, because he's promised he was not going to do that. Of course, times change. Things are fluid. I get it. But you and I think are pretty much on the same side on this one. We don't want boots on the ground. We don't want Americans involved in this. It's something where we're happy to provide intelligence, satellite, sell them armaments, sell them what they need to knock down the incoming ballistic missiles, to support the Iron Dome. maybe even knock some of them down coming in if they have one of our ships off the coast to help do that if necessary, but only involved in defensive, nothing offensive that gets us dragged into World War III. I think you and I agree on that one. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
No, absolutely.
I don't want to see Donald Trump's administration damaged in the ability to go get all these things done domestically that we need done. It seems like regardless, whether it was COVID and they interrupted his administration with COVID, it seems like whenever a president tries to start making changes domestically, particularly you're talking about getting rid of the Federal Reserve or putting in a system that would override the Federal Reserve, whenever a president tries to make these bold moves, the neocons and the uniparty and the globalists find a way to drag him into something where all his attention is taken away from domestic problems and put onto international problems. Comments?
Yeah, listen, the reason we have anything like a neocon that exists in our country's political makeup is because of the existence of the Federal Reserve and the change in attitude that began in the very early 20th century, late 19th century, of intervention around the world. And that was never our policy prior to the Spanish-American War. I mean, there certainly were some people that thought along those lines, and we had little things pop up here and there. But we were a country that didn't engage worldwide. Of course, in the late 19th and early 20th century, we didn't necessarily have that capacity. But interestingly, when we went to the income tax and we went to the creation of the Federal Reserve, which allows us to print money and it's not backed fully by gold. We still had exchanges in gold internationally, but for our own currency, we propped it up just based on whatever the Federal Reserve said. It also happened in Great Britain at the time. The British pound sterling went away for World War I so that they could finance that war. I mean, that's the biggest problem. When you don't have the money to do it, it brings a self-imposition away from war. And I'm not saying the Federal Reserve was designed only for war. It just facilitates it so well so that this desire to go in and be expeditionary and use kinetic energy to change something you don't like politically around the world becomes much easier. This is why we want restraints on government, which includes a gold standard, in my opinion, and I think it's the best way to restrain that, so that therefore all you're doing is defending yourself if you have a major problem. And that worked for a long time in Western culture after the emergence of the pound sterling some 2 or 3 centuries prior to that. That sort of thing is what we want back on the international stage. But there are always, see, what you talked about, Donald Trump's presidency, getting these bypasses, that's the way a presidency works. That's why you want someone like Donald Trump who's able to see through that and get back to the basic principles that we need to be concerned about. I don't think he's going to take us into war with Iran. I really think he's going to resist that. The only thing that would cause him to take any kinetic action is going to be related to if Iran is stupid enough to try to attack our soldiers. And I still think he'll do it in a limited fashion. The killing of Qasem Soleimani back in his first administration is an example of that. He did that. Because we had our troops attacked, it was a limited thing, and he backed off because he knows that it's not necessary to get into these major conflicts.
Indeed. So we don't know what awaits tonight, but we are hearing that, Iran is threatening something big tonight. Now, whether that comes to pass, I don't know. We'll find out. We'll be here to cover it live this evening on the air with all of our normal experts you expect. We also are hearing that a plane went from China to Iran. We don't know what was aboard or on board that either. But this is where, to me, it starts getting very concerning, is if you have this alliance of Iran and China and Russia and North Korea. I mean, then things start getting kind of dicey. Benjamin Netanyahu, he did have a statement to ABC News. Let me see if I can find the clip. And he was talking about New York. Here it is. Listen to what he had to say. Here we go. Benjamin Netanyahu.
Look, I understand America first. I don't understand America dead. That's what these people want. They chant death to America. So we're doing something that is in the service of mankind, of humanity, and it's a battle of good against evil. America should and does stand with the good. That's what President Trump is doing, and I deeply appreciate his support.
Okay, there you go. Again, I want to play that again. You said something about New York. Listen again.
It's Tel Aviv, tomorrow it's New York.
Okay, today is Tel Aviv, tomorrow it's New York. I don't know if he's got intel or if that's just a reference, but that has been the concern of many of us. All the sleeper cells that we know are here. And we even know they're here from some federal trials that show that some of these groups are here. So what do you make of that statement by Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, first of all, it's kind of a little bit of a drumbeats of war sort of statement, and it intended for effect. I'm going to restrain myself from saying how much he's absolutely trying to draw us in, but there's no doubt that Israel could be benefited if we throw our Air Force into this and add to the bombing runs that they're doing, particularly the mega bombs that we can drop that would actually get, and in fact, I've heard military experts talk about the fact that our bunker buster bombs could definitely get down I guess, up to 2 miles maybe, or however deep these things are in Iran to get to their facility they have underground. They say they've tested it in other ways, and it could do that. There's no doubt Israel would like us to do that. I think it's absurd for us to even try to do that. And I do see, even though Donald Trump is throwing different messages out and it seems confusing, I think what he's doing is and I'm saying this from experience watching him through the years, he's not going to take the worst case scenario off the plate when he's trying to negotiate something. And I think he would be serious about it. It's not like he's feigning what he would do, but I think the goal here is to get Iran back to the table, show them that they're on their heels, and they are way on their heels. It's not being reported enough in the news. Iran has been severely set back in all that Israeli air forces have done so far in their bombing runs. You'll notice you don't see a mass of Iranian planes coming up. Of course, they have inferior equipment to what the stealth fighters that Israel has. And I'm certain, I haven't seen actual reports, but I'm certain that much of their Air Force has been severely damaged. They have about 2/3 the aircrafts on the books that Israel has. But, sitting out there, you're talking hundreds of aircraft between Iran and Israel in their air forces. And we've got almost 20,000 aircraft. We got almost 15,000 aircraft. Like, we are the big player on the stage. Listen, and one other thing I want to address earlier, mentioned Pete Hegseth is moving assets into the region. I don't think that means that Pete Hegseth is some sort of neocon. I think it's appropriate for the Department of Defense to react and give the president the options that he wants. That does not mean he's going to pull those triggers. It just means you have to be prepared as a military. And I'd like to see us be less of an expeditionary military with bases all over the world, constantly under threat. But we are under threat right now. We do have soldiers in the region. You need to protect those assets. You need to protect those men and women who are fighting for us or available to fight for us. So that's rational and reasonable, but I think Netanyahu would like us to get involved. There's no doubt about that. And I think the president needs to resist that. I think he's on the right course right now. Hold your hand, hold your fire, and let Iran get to the place where they've got to come back to the table. They're already in that place. They're just trying to find help and support wherever they can. I don't think they're going to find it.
President Trump was asked or made a comment, I guess, in response to Tucker Carlson, I guess, saying something about President Trump being implicit in Israel striking on Iran. Listen to what President Trump is reportedly said. I'm going to be hearing it for the first time along with you guys. Here we go.
I don't know what Tucker Carlson is saying. Let him go get a television network and say it so that people listen. Thank you.
Ooh, let him go and get a television network so he can say it and people can listen. Seems to be implying that he needs to go get a TV network so that people can actually hear him. I don't know if that was a little bit of a dig, like his audience isn't as big as it was when he was at Fox, therefore most people aren't hearing it. I don't know. It seemed like a little bit of a dig, but I guess it was all in relation to Tucker is saying again, President Trump, is complicit in Israel's attacks on Iran. What do you make of that?
Well, listen, there are a lot of things I do like about Tucker Carlson, but he has so run away from his neocon past that I think he makes these excessive statements. I'm with Donald Trump on this one. I don't dislike Tucker. I mean, I'll have a criticism here and there, and some of them serious, but nah. I think Tucker's wrong on this. Tucker still does have a big audience because, one, we're talking about him. Two, you run into him when you're out on social media, so he has some audience too. And maybe the president's a little excessive in that reply, but he certainly doesn't have a network. So anyway, Donald Trump knows what he's doing. I think he's comfortable with himself. I think he knows that he's trying to work towards peace. I have confidence in that with him. I haven't seen anything in his entire political career since he went down the escalator in 2015 that tells me that he's out trying to figure out how to make war. He doesn't have that instinct. His instinct is toward peace. He's not a pacifist, but he certainly is for peace, and I'm pleased with that because I am very glad that we have tended away from this neocon push to constantly get into wars. And I'm just looking next door to Iran, or in the next door on both sides of Iran, and I'm looking at Afghanistan and Iraq, and George Bush took us in there on a policy of preemption, which it totally broke down the international system. By the way, don't tell me these other people are the ones who are holding, the standards that have really made the world safe. No, that they're the ones that are weird, and we're breaking it all apart. The Bush administration did that with this policy of preemption. We're going to go kill you before you kill us. It's Minority Report. Donald Trump's taking us away from that. I think that's a very healthy and positive thing. And Tucker's, I think, he didn't quite jump the shark, but he did get out ahead of his skis there. And I'm with the president on this one.
And of course, it was 10 years ago today. The president went down the golden escalator. I remember that morning. I remember it well. I propped up in bed with some pillows. My wife woke me up. I was sitting there working on my computer. I got all propped up in bed to load up all kinds of articles on the website for the morning, drink my morning coffee, had my dog at my feet, beloved dog Delta, who's since passed away. And my wife said, "What do you make of this?" And I said, "I love it. It's time for someone to shake up the establishment. And I think Donald Trump is going to give the Republican Party a run for their money. I'm tired of both parties, and I think it's great. We know it's going to be entertaining at the very least." So that was my response. And boy, 10 years later, has it indeed shaken up the Republican Party, and it has been entertaining. But he went on to win the first time. I think it shocked himself. And I didn't think he'd win the second time. I thought the system was so rigged, but apparently it was too big to rig, and he won, and here he is. But what's got me concerned is he might get bogged down in a war, and we won't see the domestic problems fixed that we have to have fixed. But 10 years ago today.
I don't think we're going to get bogged down in a war. I mean, I could be very wrong. I'm just, I know that it's a risk. I grant that. But let me give you my perspective on when he went down the escalator, since you're talking about it. Mm-hmm. My wife she likes to say how she was on board from the very beginning. In 2015, when he did this, I was less than a year removed from working on Capitol Hill at the time. This is before I went to work for Thomas Massie later. And, I had worked closely with Ted Cruz's team. I was Tim Huelscamp's chief of staff at the time. I was on board with Ted Cruz, and I knew a lot of Ted Cruz supporters who were just so ticked off at Donald Trump, and they hated him. I never had this radically negative opinion of Donald Trump. I at the time didn't see how he was going to be able to put it all together. But the one thing I would always tell these Ted Cruz people who wanted me to complain about Donald Trump with them, I did say this one thing consistently. I said, if this guy is capable of becoming president, he is going to turn over all the trash cans in Washington, D.C. and expose exactly what the problems are. I had seen it firsthand, and everyone knew even then that Washington, D.C. was bad, but they didn't understand quite how bad. The one great and positive thing that Donald Trump has done in American politics is expose Washington, D.C. for what it really is. Not just these are politicians that try to, get things done for themselves and there's little side deals and all that kind of stuff. No, it's much worse than that. It exposed the neocon movement for what it really is and what it's really about, which was not the protection of the American people, but the advancement of warmongering. And it exposed the kind of corruption that was really taking place. The immoral behavior when it came to the fact that we found out very clearly what we already knew, that there were millions of dollars paid out to protect congressmen from ever having exposed the sexual affairs and the sexual abuse that would take place from time to time on Capitol Hill. That in 2017, there was a report that showed $17 million had been paid out in sexual abuse cases, all the way to the corruption that came about related to stock trades that were happening on Capitol Hill on both sides of the aisle, that they were taking advantage of what in effect was insider information. They were advancing legislation or making moves that would allow them to enrich themselves because they came in on the stock deals first and took advantage of it, sold or bought. And even more than that, even further on to the whole concept of the deep state and whatever the actual definition of that is, the American people now know more clearly with Donald Trump on the scene that there was this fifth estate that was operating in Washington, D.C. beyond the bounds of what the American people were electing their representatives to do for them, that it was actually running the elected representatives. Donald Trump has begun to break that paradigm. It's not all gone yet, but he's definitely made advancements in that, and the American people aren't fooled by it anymore. So I'm very grateful for the advent of Donald Trump on the scene. It has been a wonderful positive for this country, and I hope we can continue to build upon it at the end of his term.
Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has put out tonight, pray for our troops, pray for the innocent people in Israel and Iran, pray that we aren't attacked on our homeland after our border was open for 4 years and millions of people and millions of gotaways came in. War has bad consequences. We voted for America first. I'm glad she is one sounding the alarm about the homeland, because everybody knows that's been my one faithful song among a few, but that's been one over and over, is the homeland. Since I started working so aggressively with Peter Vincent Pry and other guys that were experts on Islam and are experts on Islam and the terror cells and the trials, the Holy Land Foundation trial during the George W. Bush administration, that this is the big threat that a lot of Americans don't know about. And they don't realize how vulnerable we are, from the power grid to all kinds of issues with our just-in-time inventory, the American truckers, that we help them break that story about all the illegals that are driving big rigs in the country. We are so vulnerable at so many levels. The Bible says fear not. So I don't have fear in the sense I don't believe God is in control or sovereign. I know he is. But I fear for my nation when I realize that in many regards, we don't really have much of a leg to stand on to ask for God to bless America or protect America. I just hope that God, in his grace, looks down on the righteous, whatever percentage of the country that is, and protects us, and the others get the benefit from it. Otherwise, I don't really know how we can ask for God to protect us. But I'm very fearful for my country because of what I've been studying with the former Deputy Director of the Counterterrorism Division of the FBI, Terry Turchi, for several years, all the way to Chris Gobbets, who infiltrated Muslim Brotherhood and went in and came out with 12,000 documents. His father, Dave Gobbets, was a former military guy, federal agent, who went into over 400 of these mosques in America. All you have to do is listen to their speeches coming out of their own mosques. And if we get into a war and you've got these terror cells, the red-green axis in America, and they are ignited, they are activated, She's right. We better pray that we aren't attacked in our homeland.
You know, there's no doubt that you referenced earlier potential Iranian cells in the country. That certainly is a possibility. In fact, I think we have some real evidence that exists. We have Chinese cells in the country. There are a lot of these foreign actors that the Biden administration and some prior to him allowed in, the Obama administration as well. Even though they deported a lot, they did allow some of these people in. But more importantly to me, because I think we can deal with those things. I think we have some of the investigative infrastructure that if we use it correctly, certainly, hopefully the Trump administration will, we can deal with those things. Not that it wouldn't pop out and be a problem. I'm more concerned about what I've been watching happening in LA and around the country with a group of Americans, a minority group of Americans, I might add, but still large in number, that are willing to foment riots on the street. Now, I understand many of those are illegal aliens, but it's also some American citizens.
Well, and guess who LA wants to pay for these damages? Guess who they want to have pay for it all?
Probably the federal government.
Yeah, watch this. Here we go.
I am demanding full accountability and reimbursement for the local costs incurred, including injuries to local officers and damages caused by the chaos unleashed when the Trump administration recklessly deployed the military and ICE agents into our communities. They are the ones who created this unrest, and they are the ones that need to foot the bill.
I mean, does it even justify a response? Because I think we all know what.
Well, I have a response. She can go pound sand. Listen, you remember the Obama administration was going to throw out tens of billions of dollars to bail out California and other states that had deficits after the financial crisis. And there was literally legislation on the table. There should be no federal money going in to bail out local problems. We got enough federal money flowing in through welfare programs, and that's bad enough. But those are established programs that have some specific purpose. I disagree with most of them, but that's what's there. In other words, the individual takes advantage of the program rather than these bulk swaths of money that are going out to fix problems that politicians caused. Every one of these states and local municipalities should just pound sand. They owe us, frankly, for making sanctuary cities. If we're going to talk about that, then they ought to pay the American people back through their funds because they've decided to allow the instigation of regular crime through these illegal criminal aliens that they allow to stay in their cities, and also for the harm they've done to the American people by messing up our election system, by working hard for these aliens to be counted in the census, to upset the true balance of our political system that reflects the American people. It doesn't in many ways, certainly not in these states. They have caused immense harm to our country. They helped get Joe Biden election. Even if we take off the table any thought of the election in 2020 actually being stolen by the moving of votes, and I don't necessarily hold to that en masse. What I do think it really did happen in 2020 was the influx of these citizens, the institution of mail balloting systems that are insecure, and we cannot confirm whether they were handled properly in every instance, and the changing of elections to meet the needs of the Biden campaign in 2020 using the excuse of COVID and bypassing Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution. The harm that was done was Joe Biden was elected, and $7 trillion extra dollars printed later. We had inflation and the theft of the American people that was caused by Democrat policies. Not that Republicans are without blame, but they don't go to the extent that Democrats did. And it's really funny to hear Elizabeth Warren going against Scott Bessent on Capitol Hill recently saying, and you support a bill, the big beautiful bill that will build greater deficits. And I'm like, Elizabeth Warren, what are you talking about? The Trump bill is the pikers compared to to what you guys do.
And we will have breaking news tonight as we have pictures of Tehran. I guess they're trying to deal with an attack tonight on Tehran from Israel. President Trump tweeting out everyone should evacuate Tehran. Clearly, he knows what's coming, and otherwise why he would say that. There are reports that we are now officially involved. We cannot confirm that. We will work to do that and come back live, 7:30 Central, Brandon House Live. Jim is theconservativecaucus.org, us, worldviewtube.com. Take care. Tonight on the Worldview Report, Iran and Israel are in a total war with bombs and missiles laying waste to major cities in each country. And so far, the U.S. has avoided direct involvement. But how long will that last? Iranian casualties are much higher than in Israel, and there's an obvious reason why. We'll explain how the U.S. has the same weakness as Iran, and should we ever experience a war on our soil, we're going to learn the hard way. A man wanted for a politically motivated shooting in Minnesota gets arrested following an extended manhunt. We'll take a look at the man behind the riots engulfing American cities. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. I'm Brandon House. Leading off tonight, the war between Israel and Iran continues to escalate following a third day of Israeli bombing, raids that wiped out a large portion of Iran's military command structure, as well as its top nuclear scientist. 5 separate car bomb explosions were reported in Tehran on Sunday, killing more of Iran's nuclear scientists. Later in the day, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed to have killed Iran's chief intelligence officer and his deputy. Both sides are suffering heavy casualties from missile barrages, and there are signs the war is spreading into Iraq, with reported drone attacks on U.S. diplomatic and military assets there. Here's a look at missiles scoring direct hits in Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, Iranians keep shouting death to Khomeini, while Tehran burns from Israeli bombardments. Watch this. The big news, of course, is that Israel is seeking direct U.S. intervention in the war to help it destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, a request that so far has been denied by President Donald Trump. According to a report by Axios, Israel is seeking help targeting and destroying the fortified Fordow uranium enrichment site. Axios says that the Trump administration is so far rejecting the Israeli request. But if that site remains intact, Israel's mission to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, well, it will be considered a failure. At least 224 people have reportedly been killed in Iran as of Sunday night in the ongoing tit-for-tat attacks, with more than 1,200 wounded. At least 24 people have been killed in Israel, mostly in and around Tel Aviv. That's following ballistic missiles